Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am still feeling really good. One, that Tuesday, went well, but also that it's over. We're now like 4 days since Election Day. We still actually don't know the results of everything, but still, I think I can speak for probably everyone up here that like it's nice to just be able to be past that until, it starts right back up. So I'm honored to be here with the three guests that we have today. And we're having intergenerational conversations, so I think this is going to be a really good one. And we'll just hop right in. Max, this first question is for you. One of the most exciting things that we saw this election were a lot of firsts, and you're actually going to be the first Gen Zer in Congress. So congratulations for that. So I'm wondering, what was going through your head when you saw that you were headed to the U.S. House of Representatives?
A lot of feelings, and thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. Um, you know, it was a bittersweet night for me because I'm from Florida. We didn't have such a good Tuesday. But it meant the world to be surrounded by all of our supporters and our organizers and our volunteers and the people who literally put so much sweat equity on the line. We announced this campaign August 11th of last year. So I'm very happy that Election Day, came and went. And what was going through my mind were a ton of things. Obviously, being the first of a generation, I think, means a lot. I know I'm the first, won't be the last. But that's not the reason I ran for Congress, right? I ran to represent my district, my home, Central Florida, that I've been organizing in for the past decade. And just really looking forward to serving the people of Florida and making sure that people don't give up on our state. The state we're in 2020, over 60% of voters said yes to second chances on Amendment 4, people to have voting rights even though they have previous felonies. Ensuring that 60% of voters in Florida said yes to a $15 minimum wage. So there's a disconnect between the great progressive policies that Floridians want and the campaigns, and we're going to figure that out.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I am definitely rooting for you. Andrea, I think Max is the embodiment of something else that we saw during this election, which was high youth turnout. There's often this narrative around young voters that they don't show up, especially when we need them to show up, but I think we saw the opposite this time. So what were you seeing out of the youngest voters this election?
Yeah, it's time for that narrative to change. Young voters care, they're showing up, and they're showing up in record numbers. In 2018, we saw really high voter engagement among young people, then again in 2020, and again in 2022. I think young people are connecting the issues of the day to the things that they most care about, the things that are happening all around our country and also the things that are happening right there in their local government. We saw trends really, really early this election cycle. Vote.org invested a multi-million-dollar campaign to reach young people through everything from campus engagement to influencer engagement, text engagement, streaming services, you name it, we were out there doing it. But what we saw is that really early there were huge spikes in voter registration among young people. In particular, voter registration right after the Dobbs decision. So in Kansas, we saw a 1,000% spike overall in voter registrations. In 10 other states, we saw a 500% spike, and nationwide, we saw over a 300% spike. So people immediately connected the dots between what was happening in the country and what they really cared about, and we could see early on that people were going to show up in this election cycle. And I think that that's really the big story here is, what does it take to invest cycle over cycle in young people, to on-ramp the next generation in our democracy, and to know that if somebody shows up 2 or more times in election, you're more likely to have a lifelong voter, which is important for the entire future of our country. So those are some of the trends that we saw in youth voting. We're really, really excited to see that it was almost on par with 2018, which was an abnormally high year in engagement, and this is exciting for the future of our democracy.
Yeah, 2018. Yeah. Cecile, Andrea mentioned that after the Dobbs decision, there was a spike in voter registration, and I'm just curious, as the former head of Planned Parenthood, what was the impact, you think, of overturning Roe on this year's election?
Well, it's great to be here with both of you, and I just want to shout out to the great turnout we had in Youth Vote was not just didn't happen, it's because folks organized and invested. So I just want to really say that none of these things just happen. And the same was true with Dobbs. But I will say June 24th completely changed the entire trajectory of this election. And we saw it, of course, immediately in Kansas, where the first abortion ban, potential ban, was on the ballot, and in a race that was supposed to be dead even, no one knew what was going to happen. We beat that abortion ban by 18 points in the state of Kansas. And huge youth vote, huge gender gap, and that was just sort of the ongoing story. There was this real rush to expand voter registration, and we saw, particularly, I think it's a state-by-state story, but if you look at states where folks knew that abortion was on the ballot, there was an incredible gender gap. Like the state of Michigan, where we just, not only Gretchen Whitmer just got reelected, like slammed them. I mean, just slammed them. And Dana Nessel and Jocelyn Benson, and literally just swept the table. This was a huge, huge issue. Of course, the abortion ballot initiative there won overwhelmingly in the state of Michigan. And I think that's one other indication. There were 6 ballot initiatives in 2022 on abortion, both in the reddest of red states and more moderate states. Every single one of them, voters, bipartisan majorities of voters, voted to keep abortion legal in their state. And that says a lot.
So I think it's safe to say it had a huge impact on the midterms. I'm going to ask you another question about what we saw in Texas. You are a Texan. Your mother was governor. You worked with Beto O'Rourke. And you mentioned what happened in Michigan, where we saw pro-choice, pro-democracy, statewide candidates reelected to office. But then you look at a state like Texas, who we saw, the abortion ban, they kind of led the effort. But we also saw in Uvalde and in the past gun violence. And these are 2 issues that seem that they would be really central to voters. But what we saw was voters sent Greg Abbott back into office. So I'm curious what you think about that when it seemed that people were really outraged by both abortion and gun violence in the state.
Well, it's absolutely true that Greg Abbott and, frankly, the state Republican Party are completely out of step with where the voters are. So that I just want to state that for the record. Greg Abbott did win, but it was the worst showing he's had since he has run statewide in Texas. And what was supposed to be a big red wave in Texas actually didn't materialize. And in fact, one of the things that's talked about is the Rio Grande border. Even though the Republicans completely gerrymandered the districts there, Democrats held in the Rio Grande border. And so I think this is the fact is we have not elected a Democrat statewide in Texas for 30 years. So it's gonna take more time, but every single year we do better. And I guess one real bright spot I want to say, and again, I think it's just, since we're talking about young people, the exciting thing to me is that young people that are running for office in the state of Texas and across the country, they're more diverse, they're more progressive, and they are our future. And the one I'd like to shout out is in Harris County, Lena Hidalgo, the county judge of Harris County, was reelected. They dumped millions of dollars on her, and she won re-election. And to me, that's what gives me hope about the future of the state of Texas.
Yeah, I actually went to grad school with Lena, and
she's
yeah,
amazing,
she's
right?
Amazing,
She's completely amazing.
Yeah, and another one of my friends ran and won office in Texas. So there are good things happening there. Maxwell, going to come back to you. You ran on a platform of racial and social and economic justice. And I'm curious, how does that work after you're elected? So often people have campaign promises and then they get elected and run into some stumbling blocks on actually advancing their policies. So I'm wondering how you'll approach that, and if you have to set expectations with your supporters, what you'll do.
And we did set expectations throughout the campaign. I think one of the many reasons why 50% of this country doesn't vote is because they've been lied to by politicians for generations, right? Vote for me and this is gonna happen tomorrow, this is gonna happen next year. We know that's not how Congress works ever, right? I'm one person of 435 that will vote, and I get 1 vote. And so I'm honest about that. I've been honest about it. I can't promise what bills are going to pass, but what I can promise is what I believe in, how hard I'm going to fight for it, and how I'm going to be a good member of the community and be part of this co-governance, right, in Central Florida. And it's because it's not all about me, right? It's about a movement of candidates, a movement of people coming together to create the world that we want to create. So I think we did a good job of really setting that expectation. If you talk with our supporters in Florida, they don't expect me to go and just pass things next year. They expect me to co-govern with them and be a member of the movement and work with them to achieve the things that we want. And I think we need candidates to be more real with the voters and give them more credit, because I think especially young people, they understand that they just want to be a part of the movement to change this country for the better.
Yeah. Wonderful. Andrea, I want to shift to voting rights now, which was another issue that we found out voters really cared about, having democracy protected. You've said before that you're a black woman from the birthplace of the KKK and that you know what people will do to keep people like you from voting. How do you think we did in this election cycle with voters having to vote under such circumstances with a lot of the laws that we saw passed since 2020?
I think we now have two types of people in this country. We have those who want a healthy and thriving democracy where everybody has a voice and everybody has an ability to cast their ballot, cast their vote. And then there's a second type of person who wants some other style of government. And that's really where we are. And that other style of government is about asserting control over people instead of people choosing who they want to lead their communities, their city, their state, their federal government. And so I think that, growing up in Indiana, I really, quite frankly, got a first row seat to what voter suppression looks like, both old and new school tactics. The old school tactics of having police around a polling center and intimidation and all of that, and shutting down polling locations, and then new school tactics now of digital voter suppression, things like that, just disincentivizing people from participating to begin with. As head of Vote.org in 2020, when I went to go to early vote, much like many people in our country, I faced hours-long lines. I mean, I would think it was 6 or 7 hours my first time going out to vote. I went back the next day to vote, still couldn't vote. Went out the third day, my team started to see me get voter suppressed in real time and kind of what it takes to be able to participate in our democracy. And I think that at the end of the day, that is all seated in fear of competition and wanting to control the political environment so that everyone doesn't have full equality and participation. And this year, what we saw was that people overcame some of those voter suppression laws that happened across the country. They showed up anyway. I think it speaks a lot more to the resilience of the American people, the resilience of the American public, but what it doesn't, you'll hear people say, well, that means that those laws didn't really suppress. Yes, they did. The intentionality is to shave off voters 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 votes at a time. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And what we're seeing is that the American public gets it, though. They know what's happening, and they're fighting back, and they're resilient. And so I think this cycle means that there was a lot of success, very high turnout, and very high participation in the face of those who would seek to dismantle our democracy and access to the ballot box.
Thank you. Maxwell, this next question is for you. It's been some time since we've seen so many activists run for office and actually get elected, and there are some people who are really excited about that, but I think there are some people who are used to the status quo and are concerned that you might shake things up too much. And so, you're an activist. In 2020, you were working days at March for Our Lives, which started after the Parkland shooting. And then in the evenings, you were on the streets protesting racial injustice. What value do you think organizers and activists bring to being in public office?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the experience and the way we think of what organizing means and how we can move forward together. And like I said, it's just the experience I bring. I'm going to Congress, and in 2020, when I was on the streets protesting during the Black Lives Matter uprising, I was tear gassed, I was maced, I was arrested, I went to jail. I'm going to represent those same streets in Congress now. And I think Yeah, and I think it's important to have that perspective at the table, and really bringing up what it means to be an organizer, what it means to do direct action, what it means to work as a movement to build the world that you want to build. You know, I always say voting is it's extremely important. It's a tool in our toolbox, and we got a lot of tools in there, right? And we got to use every single one of them to build the world that we want to do. I hate when I hear people talk smack about voting or talk smack about protesting. It's all important. We need it all, right? We need the mutual aid. We need the protests. We need the votes. We need art and culture being involved in this, and that's the only way we're going to build the better world that we deserve. So,
Yeah. Can I ask you a quick fun question? So you worked as an Uber driver even while you were campaigning, and persuaded some of your passengers to actually go vote.
sorry, Uber.
Are you going to keep driving Uber now?
I always joke that I would, but I think it's illegal. I don't think I'm allowed to like moonlight as a member. Yeah. So.
Okay, so we have about a minute left. So, Max, just one more question for you. You described campaigning as the hardest year of your life, and Cecile here has grown up in politics, watching her mother govern in Texas. Do you have anything that you would like to ask her about what lies ahead for you?
Do we have more than a minute?
Not really, but go ahead.
I would say, how do you stay grounded in why you got there and everything, right? Because I remember just about a few weeks ago, I went to DC for a week, got back to my district, and I was like, wow, I mean, it really is another world up there. So.
No, I mean, you're going in with all the right experience, because it is about the way you stay grounded is by staying close to the ground. And I think, you know, what I had for a hot second, I had the honor of working for Ms. Pelosi, and I tried to like sort of say to folks there, like everyone here who's serving in Congress, they come from somewhere else, and what they really care about is what's happening back home. And that's why, I guess if we end on a positive note here, to me, folks who are coming to Congress, who've done the hard work, who understand their districts, who understand why they are going to Congress, like you, that's what's going to change our democracy. And I guess in a time in which there are so many problems, this is going to be the most diverse, racially, in terms of gender, in terms of income, in terms of background, Congress we have ever had. And so thank you for being there for all of us. It's really exciting.
So, yeah, I think that was an amazing panel, not just because I'm moderating. So thank you to our three panelists for joining us, and thank you to you all for being here today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.